I'm Josh Barrow, host of Left, Right, and Center, KCRW's weekly forum for civilized debate across the political spectrum. Today's news cycle demands more time for deeper analysis, so Left, Right, and Center is now a full hour every week. Subscribe and listen at kcrw.com/LRC.
On To The Point, we try to make sense of the policy debates and the political sideshows on the campaign trail.
You have this kind of asymmetrical warfare coming from a guy who's great at a soundbite, lousy at an answer.
So are you looking for your own billionaire?
No, I don't want my own billionaire. I'm going to raise the vast majority of the money.
Brace yourself, America, for what?
King Trump.
I'm Warren Olney. To The Point has you covered for the 2016 campaign. Find the To The Point podcast on KCRW's iTunes page.
From KCRW Santa Monica and KCRW.com, it's The Treatment. Welcome to The Treatment. I'm Elvis Mitchell. One of the fun things about doing this show is getting to discover a new film by somebody who I've been a fan of for a while. And so at the LA Film Festival a couple of years ago, I saw a film whose opening credit sequence basically tells us what we're seeing, a film called Echo Park that takes us up Sunset Boulevard into Echo Park. And its star and producer, Tony Okungbowa, is sitting across from me. First of all, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm a huge fan of yours as well. I mean, if I can sort of take the liberty to say, besides the fact that I love the show, I mean, you're a man after my own heart, style-wise. I noticed the Tom Browns today. Every time we see each other, we talk about fashion and watches and different things. So you're a man after my own heart.
As they say in Die Hard, we could talk about men's fashions all day, but let's talk about your movie instead, because it's really, you brought up something that we share, and it's a movie about people collecting things and not really understanding or seeing other people, because there's so much in the habit of collecting things and talking about things they acquire. Right. It's almost a way people can define themselves in LA, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I feel like as a collector, I collect sneakers, I collect records. So it was very much a sort of natural thing to be able to sort of come up with a script like this, because it literally speaks to people like me and people like yourself and people that I've grown up being around. And it's one of those situations that it was, I guess, life imitating. Do you know what I mean? And so it was very much that for us.
But it's also, you got to find a way to do this where people just aren't so defined by these things that we don't care about them. And I just found that to be an interesting thing, that your character is somebody who really, in his way, is afraid to connect. So he invests so much emotion into these things around him, and he cherishes his friends. It's just that he can't see beyond these things.
Yes, I think part of it is, if I know it's like this, I am safe. And going any deeper could be somewhat problematic. And I know people like that. I mean, I've had spells of that in my life it's probably still around, where, at least I know what I'm dealing with here. And when anything throws that off, oh, it's not acceptable, or you fight tooth and nail to try and sort of right the ship as you think it should be. But the reality of the situation is change comes from discomfort. And it's only when the discomfort is forced upon him that the change happens.
But it's also a piece, too, that's really about the LA experience, which is whether you come from another continent or another part of the country, people who aren't from here.
Right. I mean, for me, as that character and as Tony the person, I came over here and I lived in West Hollywood when I first landed, and then when I decided to sort of settle to West Hollywood for me is normally the sort of launch pad to where you want to be an East Sider or a West Sider.
Really?
That's how I've always seen it.
Okay.
I feel because it's one of these places where, the shops are there, the bars are there, the clubs are there, whatever. And some people love West Hollywood and stay there, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I decided I was going to become an East Sider when I visited the East Side often enough, from Los Feliz to Silver Lake and then Echo Park. And at the time, all I could afford in terms of houses was Echo Park, and so I bought and moved there, and I haven't looked back since. I'm really a bona fide East Sider when it comes to that. And a lot of my friends who move here from different countries, they're like, oh, where should I live? And a lot of the Brits go to the beach, where they go to the Venice and the Santa Monicas, which is nothing wrong with it, but I prefer the East Side. Nothing wrong with the West Side, by the way.
No, please. I don't know if you know where KCRW is based, but yes, please, nothing wrong with the West Side. Why don't you talk about the genesis of this project? Because I imagine, given your visibility, things probably came to you, but this was basically about you deciding to control your own creative destiny, wasn't
it? Absolutely. I had a really good time, and I still am very close with the people over at the Ellen Show.
Which is how most of us know you from.
Yeah,
start there.
Which I was on for about 10 years. give or take. But I realized I wanted to act and create projects. And so I had started that with a film called Restless City, which I produced and I was in. And then after that, I moved on with the guy I work with a lot, Andrew Dosumu, who's out of New York. And we did a film called Mother of George, which both of those went to Sundance, and we were very fortunate. And then I realized, okay, you know what? I want to be able to do this at my pace and full time. And so it was a hard decision to sort of walk away from Ellen. And they were very supportive, and they still are to this day. And so I moved away and decided to I came up with this story, which is a sort of collection of people and things that I've seen happen in Echo Park. And that's sort of the genesis of how the script came about.
It's also, all these projects you've been associated with, Restless City or Mother of George, are about sort of society's ending, but a way of life coming to an end, aren't they?
Right. I feel it's funny, people say to me today, because I've been here for so long, they're like, so where are you from? And I'm like, I'm the new generation of I am from everywhere and not one place, because I can go to England and fit in. I can go to America and somewhat fit in, I hope. And then I can go back to Nigeria, where my parents are from and some of my siblings still live, and still fit in. And I feel the stories that are told, like, for instance, in Mother of George or Restless City, you could literally lift those characters out of the cultures that they're from and interchange them with another culture, be it Chinese, Russian, you know what I mean? And that becomes, for me, the new America. And that becomes, the people we see in our everyday life.
But I see that. But also that each of these stories are about kind of a way of life that's sort of kind of changing. I mean, these shifts that these characters are, who are kind of outsiders,
yes,
sort of observing the world changing around them.
Right.
And I guess, is it because you bounce from so many places that you kind of watch the world change around you? You want to find ways to dramatize that?
I feel like human beings need to shed in order to move forward. That's just, for me, I feel very strongly about that. I feel like you need to let go. Somebody said something very interesting the other day. I think it was, let me get this right. Don't cheat on your future with your past. So for me, I feel like when I came to America, I was able to let go of some of the isms that I brought with me, whether it was due to culture or due to youth or whatever. And as I became, the African-American experience became my experience. The American experience became my experience, as opposed to me trying to just exist as what I was within the American experience. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so shedding is very important. So these characters that have come along have always come over with a dream of some sort to better themselves. In Mother of George, the characters opened a restaurant and, started doing business, and the mother's sort of hand over the family was being sort of shed because the sons didn't want to listen as much. And what's interesting is the character I played and the character that Isaac played were somewhat in conflict, because he's the oldest son and he's like, Mom, don't interfere. And I, as the youngest son, wanted so much to be American or Americanized. But yet when she put her foot down, I couldn't say no. And I feel like that's the sort of balancing act that a lot of immigrants follow, including the character that I play in Echo Park.
It's the treatment. We're talking about the new film Echo Park. A good time to bring up that name with its creator, basically, and star and producer Tony Okungbowa. Talk about let the audience at this point know what the movie's about. Let them know what they're going to be seeing.
Okay, so the movie's about a character called Sophie, who's played by Mamie Gummer, who leaves her life in Beverly Hills, a very comfortable life at that. She's not very happy, and she moves to Echo Park in search of something. And while she's there, and she doesn't know what that is, and while she's there, she meets a character that I play called Alex, who is also in search of something. And he's sort of on the fence of what to do next. And they end up having this affair, and he wants it to be more, and she thinks she wants it to be more, and then real life happens. That's what I like to say.
Well, one of the things that runs through these movies is, that these women are very active participants. I mean, they're not just people they're not just females who are there to serve the plot or to stand by the characters.
Absolutely.
They're kind of the centers of power, and the
Yes.
men have to make decisions based on the way these women are reacting.
Yes, I feel that is real life. In my life, I'm like our director Amanda Marsalis is a woman, and the the people distributing it, Ava and Elaine from Array Now, and I feel that is real true to my life. And women have been such an important and focal part of my life, and spiritually for me. Every time I've moved somewhere, my anchor has been a woman. It's a very bizarre thing, but
that idea, though, I think that's really interesting, because these women are ways these guys have to define what they're going to do with their futures.
Yes.
The women are kind of very much making a big impact in these lives.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, as you're constructing these pieces, when you're writing the women characters, are there performers or actors that you have in mind for these things?
Well, the script was written by a woman, actually,
Yeah.
which is Catalina Aguilera Mastretta. She wrote the script, and I brought the story to her, and she developed it. And I feel like they just happen to be women that pull the strings. And the way I've always seen filmmaking, just me personally, is that regular people in extraordinary circumstances, and the catalysts, whether they're male or female, it just happens to be that. And I feel like when it comes to diversity and sort of putting people, on screen, I feel that's very important. I don't think anybody wants, well, I certainly don't want to be put there as, okay, now we're putting the woman there, or now we're putting the black guy there, or now we're doing this. I just feel like, guess what? This person who's sort of triggering these emotions happens to be a man, or happens to be a woman, happens to be a person of color. And that is one of the things that I really, really feel very strongly about. I'm not into doing it for the sake of it's a woman or it's a man of color. And the character in Echo Park, Mamie's character, Sophie, she is the protagonist, and she's the one who drives it. And I found myself in situations like that before, where I've waited for the woman to sort of make the calls. You know what I mean?
Because part of it for me is just watching these really interesting actresses that you end up casting in these films.
Right.
And I just wonder if that's part of the interest in it too, just finding these female talents who can really anchor something.
Well, of course, I'm not totally responsible for all of that. But the people who I have been fortunate to work with, from Denai to Yaya to Mamie, they've been incredible actresses, and they've embodied the roles. I think Mamie really, really was able to just sort of get to grips with this character pretty quickly and very well. And she did a great job. When she came to the project, we talked about it, and she was like, okay, yeah, I see it. And it was just like off to the races. Yeah, but I can't take credit for that. I mean, Amanda definitely was a big part of that. I've just been very blessed to work with amazing, actors.
All right, fine. Be modest about that. We're going to take a break and talk a little bit more about men's fashion and movies. My guest is Tony Okungbowa. He's the star and producer of the film Echo Park. It's a long drive down Sunset. It's a treatment. There's more to come. Stay with us.
Long before podcasts, there were radionovelas. Celestial Blood is the first ever to combine the two. One version in English and another one in Spanish. Listen with your grandma, only from KCRW.
Listen to the Rhythm Planet podcast to explore music from all corners of the globe: Brazilian, European, African, and tropical Latin. Rhythm Planet is a state of mind. You can listen at kcrw.com/Rhythm Planet or on KCRW's app.
Welcome back. It's The Treatment. I'm talking to the star and producer and one of the creative forces behind the film Echo Park, Tony Okungbowa. And I guess I want to know, growing up, the kinds of films that you watch, because these societies in these films are kind of, even though they're very diverse in Echo Park, they're kind of they're diaspora.
Yes.
And I wonder if you found that in the films that you were watching as you were growing up.
Yeah. Unfortunately not. That's the reality of the situation, because I'm very protective, maybe to a fault, of Africa and the images that are put on the screen about Africa. And having lived in England and lived in Nigeria and then in America, I never see, and correct me if I'm wrong, very rarely do you see any sort of mainstream or sort of more popular films that come out that depict Africa in a way where they're just people trying to get by and do A to B to Z. You know, every time you see a film that comes representing Africa, it's about war, famine, bloodshed, and you never see, I mean, once again, I stand to be corrected. I've never seen an African woman who isn't dealing with some kind of oppression on the screen. And for me, I never saw that. So when I speak to people like Andrew Dosunmu or other filmmakers that I've been blessed to work with, we're always like, okay, this is not the Africa I know. Like, I go back to Africa to see my family. I don't have to worry about bombs and all kinds of, you know, things like that. I get in a car, go to a house, sit, turn on the air conditioning, talk. It's like normal. There's television. Guess what? We don't have mud huts. Guess what? You know? And so we got fed up of not seeing what we want. You're laughing, but it's true. I mean, if someone else turns around and says to me, is there war in your country? I'll be like, no. I mean, in the north, there's trouble for Boko Haram, but it's the difference of, like, I guess, the equivalent of New York to LA, distance-wise, and that's another subject. But generally speaking, Africa is not what you see on the television screen. And so, to answer the question, we got fed up, and we started making films that told our stories. Hence Restless City, Mother of George, and to a degree Echo Park, because he's just a regular guy who happens to be here doing what he's doing.
But also in these films, certainly Restless City and Mother of George, there's that sense of family really being the formational thing. And also in all these films, really, they're kind of multi-generational stories, aren't they?
Yes. And there's elements of that in Echo Park, because what my what my character was trying to do was create this family with, you know, his neighbor who he's very close to, and his kid, and Sophie, and, you know, he was happy with the family. It was good. And when it got disrupted, he got disrupted. He falls apart when it's disrupted. But once again, he's just a regular guy who's an immigrant who is living this life. And it wasn't until recently that, you know, we started seeing characters like that, you know, on the screen.
But I think also, I wonder too, because you talk about going home, and I wonder if that's something you encounter when you do get home, that there's a multi-generational aspect to being in the household, and because that idea of family teaming in places and the way family can get on each other's nerves.
Oh, goodness.
It's something you seem to find yourself attracted to, at least as a producer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my father always used to say, show me your friends and I will tell you who you are. I've expanded that to say, show me your family and I'll get a better idea of who you are. But generally speaking, I feel one of the amazing things that has become apparent to me the older I become with my family living out of the country is you create your new family. And it's either modeled on your idea of what a family should be or on what your family was like. And that's what I've had to do because I'm the only one of my family that lives in the States.
But that idea of family being what forms you, I mean, so many movies exist now. I mean, we see often in independent films about family being dysfunctional.
Yes.
And the families, the multi-generational stories told in the films that you've been involved with are just about the way these pieces fit, or maybe sometimes don't fit.
Right.
But it's not, again, that idea of melodrama tragedy, which is the African experience so often in film, or the familial experience in independent film is that. And it's almost you choosing film as a way to, I don't know if it's a conscious way of rebelling against that or just finding a way to tell the stories or find stories that you want to tell.
No, it's definitely conscious. Absolutely, it's conscious. That part of it is conscious because we're fed up. I truly am fed up. And the truth of the matter is, just give me something that doesn't, like I feel images are so powerful, more powerful. Like if you turned on the TV screen and you turned off the volume and people were walking by, the first thing they would get is the images, and they would, try to sort of interpret what's going on and make up stories as to what's going on. And if you constantly see the same images being driven down your throat, that's what happens when a person goes to the rural part of China and out of nowhere someone calls him the N-word. And you're like, what? And he's like, I saw it on TV. I mean, it happened to a friend of mine.
Really?
Yes. And you go to these places where people cross the street when they see you coming towards them because their images, the images they've been fed about Africa or African Americans or whatever in the images on television, even though they don't understand the language, is these images. And so I feel like it's time for us to take control and switch those images back with family. We have families and we love each other and we care about each other. We are not all this thing that you say we are. And I feel that's very important.
Well, I say you're an important producer and actor. My guess is Tony Okungbowa. He's starring in the new film Echo Park. It's The Treatment. Because as you were talking about this, I've talked to a number of people, of Africans, who talk about the experience of coming to the United States.
Yes.
And just being overwhelmed with the idea of, not the idea, the visual concept of watching television and movies. And as African Americans, we kind of get used to it. We kind of roll our eyes and go, that's the way the world works.
Yes.
But Africans get really incensed about
Absolutely.
it, about the lack of diversity
Yeah.
in that's how, as they would say on Fox News, mainstream media.
Yeah.
But, but that really is something I found fascinating.
Yeah, I did an interview a while back during the LA Film Festival, and I made a comment that I was used to growing up and seeing captains of industry and kings and queens who were the same color as me. And I think some people took it the wrong way, said, oh, we have them here and we have... it's not to say that they don't exist in America. But for us in Africa, it was the norm. And that's very important. So I'm used to seeing a guy who's a billionaire or, running a Fortune 500 company in Africa or the presidents of different nations. And it's what I grew up with. So when I came here and I didn't see that and the images that I saw, I was like, this is contradictory to what I'm used to seeing. And, you can be mistaken to sort of join the bandwagon and sort of think, oh, this is what I am here. I better take place. Or you can rebel and say, no, I've seen people like myself, who are not like that. And so one of the things I wanted to do with Echo Park when I spoke to the writer, Catalina, is write this guy as multi-layered rather. Like he's complex, he's scared, he's vulnerable, he's angry. Oh, that's what we are. And guess what? He just happens to be black. As opposed to, you're black, this is what you should be like. Angry or, muscly or aggressive or
one-dimensional.
And sort of that was so important to us when it came to this film. And we didn't want the race to be an issue about it. And it wasn't even mentioned in the film. And that was important. He just happens to be a person who is black.
I just wondered what kind of films you watched growing up. I mean, what kind of stuff did you see?
Well, when I was much younger, it was growing up in England versus Nigeria. In England, I watched a lot of the usual suspects like Smokey and the Bandit. My dad was really, it's crazy. Those were the things that came over. My dad was really into war films.
Okay.
Like ridiculously. So I watched Patton, A Bridge Too Far, The Longest Day. So and then it's really bizarre. And then I also
you look a long time for black people in those movies.
I know. Oh, there was none.
Exactly.
Oh, I have a really sad story about that too. And so we watched all those, and then we were also in Nigeria inundated with Indian films. Like a ton of Indian films.
Like Bollywood films you got there?
Bollywood films. People like Amitabh Bachchan, Shashi Kapoor,
Oh, man.
I Die for Mama, Burning Train. These were the films we grew up with. And little by little, we would then get slivers of films from people like Hubert Ogunde, who was like the first Nollywood filmmaker ever. And so he would come in with a film here and there. But there weren't as many. And then the African-American films we got were, Coming to America or Boys in the Hood. That left a real profound effect on me, Boys in the Hood, when I saw that, because I was like, okay, these characters are different from what I'm used to seeing, even though they're supposed to be the stereotypical aggressive, violent, whatever. So those were the types of films we grew up on. It wasn't until I went to film school, or went to, acting school rather, and in England, acting school, we read plays. So I did a lot, Athol Fugard and Chinua Achebe and Chekhov and Ibsen, and that's when I really started. And I was a black guy in acting school, so I had to be cast as those roles. So that's basically where it changed.
Yeah, you weren't doing a lot of that in Ibsen either, but you were going to...
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, Three Sisters is an entirely different play than you thought it was going to be. But it will occur to me just now. But you were saying you had a story about looking for people of color in...
Yeah, I remember growing up in England. It was really sad. My sister had scalded herself with hot water, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but most black people know this, of course. When you scald yourself, the pigment becomes like a white person's skin.
Pink.
Until the pigment starts coming back. And my sister had scalded herself, and we thought, wow, you've got part white on you. And so we were watching The Lone Ranger, and we were young, I remember specifically. And my brother and I said, we can be like the Lone Ranger. Let's boil tons of hot water and do this. And my mother came home. My mother came home. Elvis is leaping out of his seat. My mother came home and she said, what are you doing? And we said, we want to be like the Lone Ranger. And that was the first racial talk we ever had in England. And she was like, no, this is, and thank God I would have been covered in third-degree burns.
No, you'd be dead. That's what you'd be. What did your mother say to you about that? I mean, because that's something at some point, if you're a person of color, you grow up not seeing yourself.
Yeah.
You have questions about yourself because it's basically a formative thing.
Yeah.
And so how old were you when this happened?
I was probably 5, 6, but it stayed with me.
And what did your mom say when she talked to you about this?
She said, you're beautiful the way you are. This is not where we're from. We're here temporarily, because we were in England, of course, even though we were born there. And she was like, back where we're from, this is, how it is. And this is just how it is where we are. But when you go home, you'll see tons of people like you and, be proud. And so she gave us the talk, and it stayed with me, because I then made sure that I would put images that are very, because I don't know what kid is thinking how I was thinking back in the day. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, sure. But you must have had kids who've come to, I mean, there can't be any more interesting and formative experience than being on the Ellen Show and probably having young people come up to you and say they'd seen you on the show.
Yeah. I mean, while I was on the show, it was such a blessing, because, people would come up and say what you said, and older people as well. And one of the things that I really took away from that is, even though I'm not, finding the cure for cancer, I was making a difference. One time Ellen told me, you are making a difference when people say, my dad doesn't laugh at anything else except when that show's on, or he doesn't, and I really did see that. And young people would come up to me, black and white and Latino, all colors, and they were like, I want to be a DJ. Oh, your laugh is so contagious. You make me happy when I hear you laugh. I don't know if anybody knows about the show, but the laughter was organic. They wouldn't, in rehearsals, I'll let you in on a trade secret, I guess. In rehearsals, they would never tell me what was going to be done. So when they surprised me, I would genuinely be shocked and laugh. And I had a great job. I could go to work, play music, and laugh. It was fun.
And you got to pick the music you wanted to play?
Yes, well, for the most part, because, during the breaks, yes. But, you're dealing with, as you know, like licensing and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, we can't play this because this guest doesn't. Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
But clearly, though, I mean, the phrase I used at the beginning of the show, and it really seems to be the impact of the movies, is it must have been fun doing that, but at some point you want to, as a person of color especially, shape your own destiny in the entertainment business.
Absolutely. And, I often looked at people who were very successful actors and what they did with when they had that ability or that success. Now, I wasn't necessarily a big star or anything, but I had a little bit of skin in the game, so to speak. And so I thought, maybe I can capitalize on this. Maybe I can make it work for me to do other things. And, it's not easy, and it's not, but you've got to do it because you love it and you have a desire to do it. I really do believe that, this is just my opinion, of course, that artists have a responsibility to society if they choose to take it on board. And my responsibility is just telling normal stories about people and places that I come from and know. They don't have to be about the angst and, war, and I get fed up with it. I don't want to see another film about Africa with war and blood and sweat and tears. Now, not to say that these things are not entertaining or reality or real, but let's have a balance. Let's have some films that are this and some films that are that. But all we're getting at the moment is one type of film. And I'm kind of fed up of it.
I can't thank you enough for doing this, Tony. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to see you. And maybe I can steal the place where you got those shoes. I got the name of it.
Easy. It's Tom Brown. My guess is not Tom Brown. It's Tony Okungbowa. The film is Echo Park. Again, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, Elvis.
Let's thank some people here, like the person who actually mixes the show at KCRW, Kat Yor, and Blake Fight, who's the associate producer and editor. And I got some skin in the game as well, but it's not pink. It's the treatment. To catch up on past episodes of The Treatment, go to KCRW.com or listen on your smartphone with KCRW's mobile apps, or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. The Treatment is produced and distributed by KCRW Santa Monica.